and find the function. Okay, and people are coming into the room. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our garden talk. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the library director of the Larkspur Library. Today, I think you guys want to have questions at the end or throughout the presentation. Jane and Joe?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay,
I think
so if you...
we'll probably ask you a couple times to check for questions.
Okay, so for those of you joining us, so today you're going to use the Q&A box or the chat box to leave your questions. So just add those to them and I'll relay them to our guests today. So let's give it a few more minutes for more people to attend. We were almost sold out today, so that means we could have potentially 100 people in the audience, but we'll see. And again, if something happens, we are recording these talks. So if you have to leave the room or you get bumped out for some reason, we'll again send out an email to remind everybody that there's a survey, and then there is also a link to the recording and our upcoming event. So just keep an eye out that in your email. The library does have a YouTube channel, so if this is your first time coming to our garden talks, you can find all of our garden talks on the library's YouTube channel. We do post them every day or every time we record one of these, so they do go online. And again, if you're new to Zoom, just on the bottom there's a little Q&A box and a little chat box that you can click on those, and those will open the windows up and you can put in your questions. Okay, and then today we're here for the Planting the Fall Winter Vegetable Gardens in July, an interview with UC Marin Master Gardener and IJ author Jane Scurich, and Joe Jennings, who's also a Master Gardener, and the president of the Commons Foundation, who's helping us get a new library one day. So, but we'll give it a couple more minutes to start. And then don't forget, next week's a holiday, so the library will be closed on Friday and on Saturday next week for the 4th of July observance. We also have started curbside service, so if you have books that you want to check out, make sure you can call us between 11 and 5 to schedule an appointment. We do curbside between 12 and 4, and our next garden workshop will be on Saturday, July 11th, gardening with California native plants. So, but today we're here to talk with, we're going to have an interview with Jane Scurich and Joe Jennings, and I think I'm going to hand this over to you guys. So let me stop sharing.
Hi everyone, it's Joe Jennings, Marin Master Gardeners and president of the Commons Foundation. We're the nonprofit that's raising funds to fund, build, and sustain the new library. We're also getting engaged starting this week in current library program funding because of the COVID recession. We have Jane Scurich with us today, who, bless her heart, not only got an article into the IJ today, but also agreed to sit with us and talk about basically winter vegetable gardening. We're thrilled to have her here and to have such a big turnout. So Jane, welcome to the Zoom Garden Talk at the Larkspur Library. And we're so glad you're here. The first question, which usually surprises many people who aren't from California, is how many growing seasons do we have here?
Well, parts of Marin could actually harvest veggies and herbs almost every day of the year. But for distinct garden seasons, we have the spring cool season plants, then we have the summer warm season with corn and tomatoes and peppers, and then we have another cool season planting time. So sometimes for some people that cool fall season extends all the way into the spring cool season, but for others that season there'll be a break during the winter, during the rain, but definitely 3 seasons.
Right, so the assumption in the article and by being a gardener here is we can successfully have vegetable gardening year round. It
Absolutely.
just takes some planning. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And I guess from reading the article, one of the key questions is, when do you start and how do you start and what do you start while you're in the middle of your summer vegetable gardening so that you're ready for the fall?
That is always a difficult decision. And the more space you have, of course, the more things you can be planning ahead for. But for most of us, we're going to have to decide at what point we want to continue harvesting 3 cherry tomatoes a day and move on to a fall crop. Or do we really need to leave that huge zucchini plant so we can harvest 1 more? Or can we take that out and put in some kale and Swiss chard? And then there's also the opportunity to start plants in small containers and have them growing and then move them into the garden space at a later time.
So, Jane, when do you make those decisions?
Pretty much every single day you make a new decision. And really the fall crops they do need sunlight 6 hours a day, but it's not the kind of intense sun that our summer plants require. So we want to find a place in the garden where we can still have sunlight, but have it a little cooler. So we might want to try planting our fall garden in a shaded place where we don't have our green beans or squash growing. And some of the fall plants are so beautiful, like oak leaf lettuces and some broccolis. They're so pretty. They could just be in what we think of as our flower garden or our pathway garden. So incorporate some vegetables into those spaces, and you can add them as your summer annuals are dying out and your perennials have stopped blooming as profusely.
So are you already planning the fall?
I'm planning, yes. I'm looking for seeds. And, probably those of you who've been gardening this summer or started in the spring discovered that because of the virus, there's a huge interest in gardening, and the cupboards are bare in many places. So it's good to be looking now for seeds online or possibly in your local nursery if you're a person who goes out shopping. And gathering those seeds that you'd want to propagate for the fall. And you can start, there are a number of seeds that you can start easily in July. And our Master Gardener website has some wonderful list of what to start in July and August, what to start in September and October. And if you go to the Master Gardener website, marinimg.org, and click on the vegetable gardening, you'll find a list of plants that are great to grow in this area, the time to start the seedlings, the time to plant starts, and there's so much of information available there that I can't cover every bit of it with you today.
Now, in addition, there's some very good books in the library, one of which is Pam Pierce's Golden Gate Gardening.
Oh, it's a wonderful book.
And since the library now has curbside pickup, if you want to check out Pam Pierce, Golden Gate Gardening, that's sort of the best reference book for vegetable gardening in the Bay Area. And that can give you more detail on varieties to plant for the fall, winter. The next thing to ask you, though, is you've mentioned that sort of it's a different set of crops from your summer crops.
Yes.
So the cool weather crops, what characterizes them, and which ones are they?
Well, I think the first thing I think of is delicate lettuces, leaf lettuces, and then Swiss chard, kale, any of the brassica group, the cabbage, broccoli, Chinese broccoli. There are just so many that are wonderful, delicious, healthy, and quite beautiful. Here's a broccoli italic that's it's a lovely broccoli that's a little bit different than our standard grocery store broccoli. And I think if you have only ever eaten broccoli from the grocery store, you will find harvesting your own broccoli from your garden to be a totally different experience. It is.
Now, I've started broccoli from seed before, and I started in August
Yes.
so that I could transfer to my garden on October 1st. Is that about the schedule you'd have in mind?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Because it is a big plant.
It is, and it has limited growing in a 4-inch pot. So
Right.
you're going to want to get it started and then move it on to a larger, move it up. Would you like to see how I start my seeds?
Sure.
Good. So this is the container.
Here, I'll get out. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Here we have a container for seed start. So they're tiny little plugs.
Right.
And you can use a non-soil starting product or a very nice potting soil to put in each of these little plugs. And you can see it's a large container. So you could start many different types of seeds all at once, and be sure to put a tag in each one. So label this row. You might have broccoli and another kind of broccoli and Swiss chard and kale and leaf lettuce. And these little starts, once you get these growing, then you're going to want to pot them up. And I have, this is a leaf lettuce that I grew, I started as a start. And somehow I kind of forgot to put this one into the garden. So it's still in a 4-inch pot, but it is so beautiful and healthy. And this would look great in the garden, you know, not just your vegetable garden. This would be a lovely addition to any garden space. But this definitely wants to be put in a larger pot. And your broccoli, once it's in this size pot, it's going to very quickly want to move up into a garden space. So that's a process.
Before we leave that, you went from the plugs
From
to the 4-inch pot?
4-inch pot.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I would go to a larger container or to the garden plot.
And what soil are you using?
I'm using a commercial grade organic potting soil that's available at local nurseries and our local soil shops.
And then are you using any kind of additives or fertilizers or compost with that?
I really like Sure Start. And it contains a number of amendments that encourage root growth. And I use that both in my starter, my little starters, and then I use it again when I plant it up to the 4-inch, and I use it again when I put it in the larger container or the soil.
I'd say you're doing well.
This is so pretty. It's delicious too.
So this is a 3-step process then.
Yes.
Seeds in little 2-inch container, small plugs.
Yes.
And then roll it up to a 4-inch pot.
Yes.
And then plant in ground, in container, or in a bigger pot.
Exactly. And then, so this gives you an opportunity to start things much earlier than you actually have the garden space, because you can move around these little 4-inch pots any place in the garden. You can put them in the deck. You can put them on a garden wall. You just have to keep them well irrigated. And then when you have the room in your garden, you have to enrich your soil and then add it to your garden space. So it's going to take some creativity. And this is a time in our lives where we need a lot of creativity and flexibility. We're experiencing something we've never experienced before. And we don't necessarily want to go to the grocery every day to get our fruits and vegetables. And we get great pleasure out of growing in our garden. So we just all need to be very flexible and find a way to make things grow.
So 2 questions, Jane. One is, when do you start your seeds?
Well, again, I would look at the very extensive list on our website that explains the optimal planting time. Also, the back of the package will give you some instructions on how long before planting out into the garden you need to start. It's usually 6 to 8 weeks before you plant in the garden. So you'd start your little plugs 6 to 8 weeks before you wanted to pot them up or pot them into the garden.
And then
so you need to lead time.
Jane, can you do this indoors?
You can definitely do this indoors. I am very fortunate because I have a greenhouse. that my husband constructed out of some old wood and windows when we were doing a remodeling many years ago. So I start mine in my greenhouse. It gives me a lot of window and shelf space. But you can easily start them in a garage window or a kitchen window or any window around the house. You could take them outside during the day and bring them in as the nights are cooler. Or you might want to keep them inside during the hot part of the day and then take them out later in the day to get some sunshine. So having smaller pots to move around will help you work through our really, really hot days and protect your plants.
So one of the viewers asked, what's the ratio of Sure Start to potting soil? So how much do we add to a 4-inch pot?
Oh, it's just a pinch. The package has directions. I would follow the directions. It's generally just a pinch. It's a very small amount, particularly for the starts.
Okay. So then let's go through the common winter crops here. I'll go back and I think let's at least make sure everybody's kind of seen what's the spectrum of things you can be doing for this fall winter. So you mentioned broccoli.
And many varieties of broccoli are available in seeds, and you'll find a number of varieties available in starts in the nursery stores.
Okay.
Brussels sprouts, these can actually be started from seeds. I've never done it, but I'm going to try it. And then there are starts that will be available in our garden centers probably mid to late August or early September.
So you've done them mainly from starts.
I've done them from starts, but I'm going to try this from seeds. I think it'll be fun. Kale. Kale comes in so many colors and varieties. There's leafy, there's flat. It can be used in salads or stir fries or cooked. It's just, or baked, crispy kale. Kale is so versatile and so healthy. I know it had its day a few years ago and some people kind of got tired of kale, but there's so many uses for it and it's very beautiful and easy to grow.
Now, kale actually is a year-round vegetable.
It is a year-round vegetable.
Right, but it does fine in the winter.
It does great in the winter. It easily survives frost. Not a long freeze, but it can easily take the frost.
Okay.
Collard greens. So
you're showing your background now.
Yes, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and collard greens are essential Southern food. And they are delicious, and I think there's been a resurgence in their importance to our diet. They are rich in calcium and many vitamins and fiber, and they can actually grow during a freeze. They can be harvested. This photo was taken shortly after a freeze where the droplets of water or ice thawing on the leaves. And the frost really makes the collard greens even sweeter. So we really relied on them as a winter vegetable when I was growing up. Lettuce can be so beautiful. And here's some speckled, probably oak leaf and maybe speckled romaine. So there's so many varieties, and you can plant them anywhere and harvest them a little at a time, and they make a beautiful and healthy addition to your garden. Oh, I love pak choi, which is also bok choy. They're in the same family. There's so many varieties. This colorful violet colored one I love. And I just picked up, I'll show you later when we go back to showing things I have. I have another beautiful bok choy I picked up at the garden center yesterday. So large variety, very healthy, very versatile, great one to add to the garden. Sugar snap peas. Oh, who doesn't love sugar snap peas? And I'm lucky if I get them into the house for cooking because I like to eat them right off the vine. They're so delicious and fun and beautiful to grow. And last year I experimented, and here's a way to transition from the summer garden to the winter garden. So my tomatoes were growing in cages. So I tunneled around the outside of the cage 1 or 2 inches deep and added a lot of compost and some fresh planting soil and some sure start. And I put in my sugar snap peas. So by the time the peas were 6 to 8 inches tall, it was about time to get rid of those tomatoes. So the peas just climbed on the tomato cages because they did need a climbing space. So it was sort of multi-use of the tomato cages. And they continued to be harvested well into May. And then I had to make another decision to get rid of those beautiful vines and start with some summer crops. Tatsoi, mustard greens, and mizuna, all sort of Asian greens, easy to start from seed and beautiful to grow and harvest. This is one I tried last year. It was really fun. It's really a beautiful, very delicate green. You need to plant a lot of it. The package came with 1,200 seeds, so I could keep reseeding for a long period of time. You cut it while it's very young, found some recipes to use it in fresh salads and also to cook it, and it will produce small yellow flowers that are also delicious to eat. Very pretty.
So I'm going to go back to the, so we have some questions. Karen Emerson wrote, when would heating pads benefit starting seeds, and do you use them?
I do not use them, but I have seen their use in our Master Gardener greenhouse up at Falkirk. They're used to propagate the tomato seeds for our annual tomato market, which unfortunately didn't happen this year. But they really are beneficial. They really work. I've just never used them. Again, I am fortunate to have a greenhouse and I'm able to start things there. And I would encourage you, if you're getting really serious into starting seeds, a heating mat under these starts will really move things forward very rapidly. So I might even try that this year too.
So Hallie, who's in West Marin, says that I live on the coast and the late summer is more foggy than hot. Can I keep seedlings outside day and night?
Yes, unless you're going to have a freeze. So the only reason to move the seedling inside at night would be if the temperature is going to be dramatically cooler. But out on the coast, I think you have like fog type temperatures. And again, our website lists plants that are specifically grown, specifically encouraged for foggy areas. So you might want to look at those lists. And I think out at the ocean side, you're probably able to grow the cool season crops pretty much year round. Right.
And then your article mentioned something that I do, but didn't know that it had a name. Technical, it's called cut and come again, or caca harvesting. Could you walk through the caca thing again for me? This is new to me.
Okay.
And I remember it from having children, but it doesn't seem to mean the same thing.
I've never actually heard it said that way, so that's kind of a surprise. But cut and come again kind of rolls off my tongue.
Oh, I see. I was just taking the CACA seemed to be caca, and
well, cut and come again. I think a lot of gardeners of flowers are accustomed to that term because that's very common to encourage flower growth. But basically, it is taking the leaves, the oldest leaf first. So let's think about Swiss chard. And Swiss chard tends to bolt when the weather gets hot. And so a way to keep harvesting is to harvest the larger leaves continuously, every day or every 2 or 3 days. Take the larger leaves, which encourage the smaller leaves to grow and kind of prevents that bolting that would start. And so in the fall, you're not going to have the bolting happen, but you can encourage a longer harvest time by harvesting the larger leaves and allowing the rest of the plant to grow. Collard greens are a little different. You harvest the lowest outside leaf and continue to do that. And eventually you're going to have kind of a stem, almost a collared tree. As the stem grows longer and you've harvested the lower leaves, and it will continue to produce leaves at the top. So you'll lengthen your harvesting period by not taking the whole plant out at once, just harvesting certain leaves.
Right, and you can do that with lettuces, kales, all kinds of things.
Yes.
Now, in the case of broccoli in the cole families, you can harvest the first floret, the large one, and many of them will then generate additional growth on the side.
Absolutely. I would never go out with a knife and cut the plant off at the ground, as is done for commercial harvesting, is done that way. They harvest one time and that's it for the plant. But we can encourage additional growth by just taking the top part, the large part, harvesting very selectively and letting the plant continue to grow and produce.
So I'm going back to the process from seeds to starts to planting. When do you know it's time to plant up from plugs to pots to ground? How do you know?
Well, if you look at the bottom of your plant, you've got to start the plants in something that has drainage holes. And if you observe the drainage holes and see roots growing through the drainage holes, you're probably a couple of days too late for transplanting, but you need to do it right then. So don't allow a mass of roots to accumulate under the growing area. And you've probably seen this in nurseries. You go in, you pick up the plant, you think this looks great, and then you look at the bottom and it has a whole mass, like a net of roots, and it's just grown too long in that pot. So be observant. It's a lot of observation.
Right. What are the trade-offs, in your opinion, between starting with seeds versus buying starts at the nursery?
Well, starts provide instant gratification, no doubt. You pick up this start, it looks healthy. You could actually harvest some of the leaves of some of the plants the day you buy the starts. But there's so many more options from seeds. And you think about a nursery, it has only so much square space to exhibit their plants. And the vegetable starts have to compete with the camellias and azaleas and the pots and the soils and the beautiful flower starts. So they've got a lot of competition, and there's not enough room to exhibit, to maintain and exhibit 14 kinds of broccoli. Whereas the seed display is vertical and can hold hundreds and hundreds of packages of seeds in a 3-foot square space. So you're going to have a lot more seeds available, seed types available at the nursery, and online there are just endless seed varieties. And it costs almost nothing to ship a little package of seed, whereas shipping a 6-pack of very delicate starts is going to be quite expensive. So there's a cost basis, there's time and energy, and there's variety, and really it's a personal choice. Do you want it now, or do you want to enjoy the magic of this tiny little seed turning into this beautiful, robust, delicious plant? And I like the magic.
So Ashley has a question, but keep in mind, I want to come back to you about heirloom versus hybrid. Ashley asks, are there some vegetable seeds that are harder to start than others, and which makes sense to just go to a starter plant?
Yes, and as I said, I've never tried growing Brussels sprouts from seeds. I don't even know anybody who's done it, or we talked about it. So in my mind, it might be a little more intimidating. And maybe I'm wrong, but we can also start artichokes from seed, but that's almost a year-long process. So do we want to do that, or do we want to speed up our production time? I know that parsley seeds and some others in that field benefit by soaking overnight in water, or need some kind of scarification to encourage the seed to produce. So researching those seeds would be helpful.
Right.
But the common seeds, lettuce seeds are so easy, chard, kale, broccoli, they're so easy to start from seed. So I would encourage you to try those.
Now, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned fava beans.
Oh, I was kind of waiting to talk about depleted soil to mention those. So,
Well, I mean, there's two schools there, you know.
yeah.
So we'll get to fava beans. Now then, hybrids versus heirlooms.
Um, Well, I didn't really think about that a lot. I tend to grow heirlooms probably most of the time. What I really look for in seeds is non-GMO, and what I look for in starts is non-GMO and no nicotinoids added. So nicotinoids are a systemic pest control, and I don't want those in my garden. And some garden centers starts have a little tag sort of hidden behind the tag with the name of the plant, and it says this plant has nicotinoids, and I don't want that. So that's another, that's more what I look for than the hybrid versus the heirloom.
Okay, and then I think it's Fiola has written, what do you think about peat pots for seed starting?
Pea pods?
Peat pots.
Peat pots. Oh,
Yeah.
peat pots can be great. For me, I think the downside is if you don't keep them consistently moist, they're not going to deteriorate into the soil. They're not going to compost naturally. So you have to make sure that you poke the right holes in the bottom, cut a little X to let the roots out, and keep them consistently moist. You could use things like eggshells to start seeds, or egg cartons because they easily deteriorate. And then the egg shells provides calcium, and you crack it, get the starter going, and then crack it a little so it's going to deteriorate compost in the soil, and put it right in there. But peat pots are great. Just remember you need to make sure you keep them moist.
Let's double click on that. So the trick to starting with seeds in July or August for September, October is soil moisture.
Yes, you absolutely must keep them moist and keep the little seedlings from frying should we have extremely hot days. So moisture is critical.
Is it better to have the seed starts on an eastern facing exposure so that they don't get the late afternoon sun?
Absolutely. You do not want them facing the southern sun
Or southern or western.
overhead hot summer sun.
Right. This is why I've actually started seeds underneath tomato plants.
Yes.
Because they get a little dappled light, but it's sheltered. When you think about soil, and you've got your vegetables in the ground right now, and you're planning what you want to plant in the fall, what point do you think about amending the soil that the plants are going to go into? What's the window that you look at? And how do you rebuild soil? Because some vegetables are very heavy feeders.
Oh, very, very hungry feeders. Tomatoes, corn, beans, squash, they eat up the nutrients in the soil. So if you continue to add mulch to your soil throughout the season, use compost or a product that composts easily. So you're adding some nutrients there. And before you plant, you really need to add compost and other amendments that you might find are necessary for your soil. Depending on your soil, you might need lime or some other amendments, but definitely some wonderful, rich compost. And I also like to use well-rotted chicken manure, organic chicken manure, before I plant my fall veggies or my spring veggies. And that's a matter of personal choice. It's very smelly. Like I got some and put in my cart yesterday, and the woman at the shop said, be sure to roll your windows down as you drive your 1 mile home. It is smelly, but it's very rich in nutrients.
And do you amend the soil, and then is there then a lag before you plant?
For me, no, I tend to just use compost, well-rotted compost. It has to be composted. It can't be in the process of composting because that burns up a lot of nitrogen. It might be too hot. But compost and or some manure and amendments, and mix it in no double digging the old days where we would dig up the soil and turn it over twice, and that's not encouraged anymore. But mix it in nicely with your soil, and then with the soil that's in your potting container.
Now, Carolyn appears to have written in, has a great love of fava beans.
Okay.
And is trying to square the impossible problem of they can either be used to build the soil or to eat.
Oh, they can do both. It's the roots fix the nitrogen in the soil, and it is encouraged that you compost or turn the plant over in the soil after they've grown, but you can certainly harvest the peas before you turn over the entire plant into the soil. So you can have it both ways.
I have a different opinion, but I'll keep going. I'll be a good host. What are the pests and diseases to worry about from seeds to starts to planting for a fall winter crop?
Well, with seedlings and with the cooler moisture temperatures coming, I think snails and slugs are probably the biggest challenge, and I would use an iron phosphate product that's easily found on the market. It's non-toxic, but it does dehydrate the snails and slugs. And so definitely look out for snails and slugs. But maybe bigger problem than the pest is water. Make sure they're well irrigated, and the danger of frost. Make sure they're protected. And then for other pests, monitor your plants. Look at them every day if you can. I mean, we all have a lot of extra time these days. Every day, every other day, check to see if something's eating, something looks unusual. There's something on the plant that you can just pluck off before it gets a total infestation. And if you have one little seedling that's just totally infested, just take it out, remove it, and replace it with another one later on. So keep an eye on your plants and watch those little seedlings because they are very tender.
So Hallie has asked, if I put in compost, worm castings, and chicken manure in the spring, do I need to do it again before the fall planting?
Yes, because your summer plants just gobbled up all those goodies. And the soil, feed the soil, feed the soil, feed the soil. Our Master Gardener mottos are always mulch, 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 compost, compost, compost. It's all feeding the soil. Keep your soil healthy.
So I just want to share for a minute one thing for people. This is the UC Davis IPM website. Can you see it?
Yes.
And so if you're a vegetable gardener, you just Google UC Davis IPM, Integrated Pest Management. Then you'll see this square here, which says, and it gives you a list of all the different types of plants. And now here's vegetables, and you can find the vegetable that you're growing. For example, a winter crop of cauliflower, and it tells you everything that could happen to cauliflower and what to do about it. And so if you're having a problem with one of your plants, you can look up and see, oh, looks like powdery mildew. Here's how you deal with it. So to everyone watching this, UC Davis IPM is where to find the first step to trying to problem solve in the garden. We have another question. If you're putting in plants, crop rotation, what do you worry about so that you can avoid diseases and insects?
I think we are all familiar with the fact that tomatoes should not be grown in the same place year after year. And they're a member of the nightshade family, and other members of the nightshade family should not be continually grown in the same spot. So think about where you can move your plants. I mean, a lot of us don't have an option of having 4 areas that have great sunshine in our garden. So we have to be very strategic. Like this year, I'm growing my tomatoes only in containers because I only have 2 other areas where I can grow tomatoes, and I've done them the last 2 years. So I'm giving those spaces a break and growing other things there. And just thinking of shaking it up, make change, rotate. Where you had beans, put, or I guess we're just talking about fall plants. We could talk about beans too, I think. Where you had beans, next year put squash. And where you have Swiss chard next year, try something in a different family. It's good to give your soil a break from the same plant year after year after year, unless you're using an elevated bed where you're replacing all of your soil every year and starting with fresh soil. And I don't think many of us do that. So just move plants around so that they have an opportunity one year to grow in one area of your garden and the next year to grow in another area of your garden.
And then earlier you had said to keep an eye on irrigation from
Yeah.
seeds to starts to planting. What are the problems that you anticipate as a fall winter crop with irrigation?
Well, I think we think that fall, we're going to have rain. But often our rain, I mean, last year it didn't even start till sometime in December, it seems like. So I can't remember. But if we think that our fall crop is going to be watered by rain and we turn off our irrigation, we could lose our entire crop. So sure, if there's rain in early October, turn off your irrigation that day, but don't just leave it off. Remember to check. You may have to turn it back on for 2 or 3 weeks before the rains actually get established and the plants are properly irrigated. You really have to be mindful of the need for moisture. Even though our nights may be cool and there's moisture in the air and you see your deck is damp, that's not enough moisture necessarily for a new start in the garden. So keep an eye on the moisture. There's also Marin Water District offers a weekly reminder. I think it comes out on Fridays, suggesting how much irrigation is necessary. So if you sign up in Marin Water District, you can get this weekly reminder to water or not water your plants.
And then, Jane, you mentioned containers. So I know that there are a whole set of subtleties to container gardening in general, but vegetable container gardening in the winter, what are the big things to be paying attention to?
Well, the benefit of container gardening, particularly if they're not extremely heavy containers, is that you can move them under the eaves or into your garage overnight if there's going to be a heavy freeze. Containers, you have to be mindful to keep them irrigated. So you have them sitting under the eaves, maybe they're not going to get watered during a rain. So there are a lot of things that you have to keep in mind. The benefits are you can move them and they'll be protected. You can water them by hand if necessary. I have one that sits near my kitchen door that I keep herbs and then arugula that keeps growing all year round, and I can harvest it every day next to the door. And I have to remember to water it, and I have to remember to feed it. And containers need a little more fertilizer because they only hold so much soil, and they leach out the fertilizers with each watering. So you're going to have to give them a little more feed, a little more compost, and be more cognizant of the plant's needs. But they're a great way to grow fall crops because you can keep them handy under the eaves and locally near the door. But you do have to remember that deep-rooted plants are not going to do well in shallow containers. Lettuces and things like arugula and herbs will do really well, but beets and carrots and turnips are just not going to be happy in a shallow container.
And shallow, you mean 8 inches or less, 10 inches?
Yeah. A giant wine barrel, you can grow carrots and beets in loose soil in those, but I'm talking about an 8 or 10 inch container. Right. There limited availability of things you could grow, but lettuces would look beautiful in that.
So I'm going to open up there. Any final questions from folks online? None have come back in yet. You know, Jane, we have 48 people watching. This is the most we've had for a garden Zoom.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Right. You have a hit here. The article is in today's Marin IJ. Oh, we got I planted beets this year, but they don't seem to be doing well. Is that because they are more of a winter crop?
Oh, beets are kind of year-round. I get beets in my CSA box every week. I think more it's possibly a soil issue. Is your soil loose and loamy, or do you think the soil may be congested or clay and there's not enough room and viability of the soil for the plant to really establish? So you have to think about beets are root crops. So the soil really has to be welcoming for those plants to thrive.
Right. I am watering, Caroline writes, I'm watering by hand, big containers and raised bed. I water almost daily. Should I space it out more and water longer?
Plants do appreciate a deeper irrigation. It encourages root growth. I think you could back off a day and just see how your plants feel about it. They'll let you know if they're thirsty. So try backing off a day and then try backing off another day and maybe cut it down to 2 or 3 times a week, but deeper watering.
So one of the questions is, if I have a powdery mildew problem, what can I do? And does that affect whether I reuse the soil for next year?
Oh, you know what? I'm not really a specialist on powdery mildew.
I am.
Oh, good. Here we have an answer. Go, Joe.
So this is to Jane's point. If you are in the garden, keeping an eye on it, and you start to see a little bit of powdery mildew, right away, get copper sulfate and spray the weeds, and you can stop it. But if it gets away from you, it can spread through the garden. It doesn't affect the soil per se, but then I would be careful to keep an eye on it the next year. I've just seen it. I was away for 1 weekend, and I had noticed it on Thursday before leaving, got back Sunday night, and it had spread through the garden.
Wow.
So these are the problems that you can deal with quickly when you first see them, but if you let them get away from you, it can be a big one. We also got a question from Ashley. Does there need to be a rest period for my raised beds between spring and fall crops?
I don't think you need a rest period, but you definitely need to feed the soil.
Right.
That's just critical. I hope you have some earthworms in there helping you feed the soil. They're really beneficial. And if you don't, you might want to do some compost tea along with compost and amendments, and maybe some earthworm casings. So think about things that you can add to the soil, but I don't think it needs to rest. It needs to be fed.
Now, we had a question on if you're interested in sending your soil for analysis, for analysis, pardon me, for analysis. Anonymous is interested in analysis. Where do you send soil, or how do you get a soil kit?
That's something you just Google online. The Marin Master Gardeners don't do analysis of soil, but they do recommend that you send your soil out for testing. And so I would just Google soil testing kits, and sometimes some nurseries carry the kit and you put it in the vial and send it back, but it's probably easier in this day and time when you don't want to do a lot of going in different stores and moving around a lot, when you want to stay at home as much as possible. Just do some online research and get the kit in the mail and send it back.
So Jennifer has asked, I would love to keep scallions available, but haven't had much luck with them in direct sowing seeds. I probably need to find a looser, loamy soil, as you said. Any tips for growing scallions?
Again, a loose, loamy soil. They're a great crop to start in the fall. A lot of people encourage using starts rather than trying to grow them from seeds. So this might be a plant that you'll have much more luck with if you get starts. And definitely loose, loamy soil is necessary.
And very rich soil.
Very rich soil, yes.
Right. Ashley's had a problem with squash bugs. Is there anything I need to do prior to planting cold crops or the fall winter garden regarding squash bugs?
It's another one that I don't, there's so many different answers. I would go to our website and look up squash bugs, and there'll be great advice there, or Joe might have the answer here for you.
Hang on one second. That was for squash.
Squash bugs.
And squash bugs. Oh, there we go. All right, hang on one second.
Again, the Master Gardener website has so much information, and you can Google this. You can go to the Marin Master Gardener website and search for a specific crop or a specific bug, and you will get it. There we go.
So this is from the IPM website. So a squash bug is about a ½ inch long, probably disgusting looking thing. Oh, yuck. So here, this is you just Google IPM. They say we remove all the debris from the garden once the crop is harvested by composting thoroughly, disking, or rototilling, and then handpick adult bugs and nymphs, search for and destroy eggs in the spring and early summer. Trap bugs under boards near plants at night and destroy. Oh, this is. Ew. But garden insecticides are not very effective against the larger bugs. You can use insecticidal soap or neem oil. This is a big one. So yes, go look up squash bugs at IPM because they have a lot of information on it. Boy, that's a gross one. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not supposed to say that, but it is. We have a question, Jane, for you. Could you explain again harvesting lettuce by pulling leaves as needed or the whole head?
Oh, okay. So let's go back to my lovely red oak leaf ruffled lettuce that's growing in this 4-inch pot. So for lunch today, I'm going to have this leaf and this leaf. So harvesting leaves and then letting the rest grow. Just pick a few leaves at a time. This one I think is a little overgrown. So I would not cut this head. So in the grocery store, you would get a head that's been cut at the base and you get the whole head. And so that head's not going to be used again in commercial growth. But for us, we can just harvest certain leaves and let the head continue to grow. This is a great way to just have beautiful, tender lettuce leaves and continue to let the head grow. Does that answer the question?
Yes. And then there's a question on onion. Is it better to, in general, the allium families, are seeds a viable place to start, or are you better to get the starts?
So I saw someone comment just a minute ago about the viability of onion seeds. And again, there's another wonderful chart on the Marin Master Gardener website about how long seeds are viable. So some seeds, like parsley, are only really good for the very first season you purchase that package. And someone commented that onion seeds are the same. I do know that some other seeds like beans and some squash, they are viable for up to 5 years. So if you look at this chart, this will help you decide whether you want to try planting seeds that you've had in packages for 2 or 3 years, or you want to feed those seeds to the birds and buy a new package. But a lot of seeds last for a very long time if you keep them in a cool, protected place with no moisture. And then other seeds are good really for the season they're packaged, and the package will say right on it what season it's packaged for, and these seeds are good for X season. Right now, I bought some seeds yesterday, and they're good for all the way through 2021, according to this package. And then other packages, you may have had them for a while. You can try them, and maybe 1 out of 6 seeds is going to grow. So you make a decision if you want to deal with that package or you just want to get a new package.
So Jane, I want to pull us back to, you have this beautiful palette of vegetables that you can grow. Lettuces and peas and bok choy and collard greens and kale and Brussels sprouts and broccoli. Is there something that you haven't tried yet that you really think is interesting? What's out there? What is the new interesting thing you haven't tried yet?
Well, you know, I'd never had kohlrabi until I received some in a CSA box this year. And it was interesting because I found recipes and I baked it like you would bake wedges of potatoes. And that was kind of interesting. And then also I used it in slaw, like it is in the cabbage family. So I used it like as a cabbage slaw. And that was very tasty. And it's so cute. It looks like a little Sputnik. So it's a fun, interesting kind of plant to give a try. And it's obviously a conversation piece because it's so interesting looking. And it's very, very versatile. And it's very mild tasting. So I think you could add it to a number of different recipes that you might be using. I think I'm more interested in just branching out into some additional types of broccoli, Chinese broccoli, and bok choy that I haven't previously tried. I want to try some different types.
Wow. All right. And then one last question. What is CSA, and is there a good CSA in Marin?
Community, let's see, what is the name? Community.
I used to think it was Confederate States of America, but that's a different thing.
That's where I grew up. Yeah. No, it's a box of produce that you order from a farm. And I am so happy this year to learn that starrootfarms.org, community supported agriculture. Thank you, Anne. That was great. I knew I should know the name. I knew community was the first word. So starrootfarms.org is owned by USF, University of San Francisco. And they have Bolinas growing grounds, and they provide produce to some of the best restaurants in the Bay Area. And of course, those restaurants aren't thriving right now, and they have this abundance of produce, and they're continuing to produce. So they have pickup areas all over the Bay Area, and I've been getting the most beautiful and interesting product, and things I'd never experienced. And right now they're sending out melons that I'd never heard of. They're mostly Spanish or Italian, and it's always a surprise, and it's always delicious. And it's just it's like the highlight of my Thursday. I pick up my box of delicious produce, and it's a great addition to my home garden, and I really appreciate it. And I'm happy that I'm helping the garden to continue, because once our restaurants come back, they're going to need the resources of this garden and others. And there are other CSA availability. This is just the one that I'm familiar with and the one I'm currently using.
So I want to thank you, Jane. This was a wonderful session. I want to let everybody know that we'll have Jane back next year to find out how her kohlrabi came out. Now, coming up in July on the 11th, we have Master Gardener Bob Maselli, who will be talking about native plants. This is the dormant season for California natives. It's a great time to plan your fall garden, particularly for color and planting. And then on the 18th, we will have Susan Pearson being interviewed by yours truly about summer citrus tree pruning. This promises to be a really helpful, interesting class for anyone with citrus trees, whether they're young or mature. So if you're interested in citrus trees, please come and attend the class on July 18th. And I want to thank the Larkspur Library for allowing us to have this garden Zoom. And I want to hope that you all come back and keep coming back, because we have some great authors and experts coming over the summer. Franklin,
And
back
for
to you.
anybody who's for anybody registered, we'll also be sending out an email with a link to the recording of this workshop. So,
well, and also the workshop, the class will be on the Larkspur Library YouTube channel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for coming, and Franklin, thank you so much for hosting.
yeah, and thank you, Joe and Jane, for being here today. As always, we'll see you guys in a few weeks. Everybody have a happy 4th of July. And again, we'll see you soon at Curbside. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.